is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering Justified, Season 6, Episode 13, The Promise. In this episode, I'm just happy when Duffy's still alive. Welcome to Unspoiled.
On this lonely road, trying to make it home, doing it by my lonesome, pissed off with lonesome. I'm fighting for my soul, God, get at you, boy. You try to hold on, fall back, I go hard. On this lonely road, trying to make it home, doing it by my lonesome, pissed off with lonesome.
Yes. You get full marks on your final exam. You are exactly right in your Deadpool.
That's really funny. I kind of figured I had an idea how, like, what the tone of the show was and that they weren't going to red wedding us, but, you know, there's always a chance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just really, like, this was a really satisfying finale. I was really pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. I really feel like the writers have a good idea of, like, this is really what people care about in this show, so let's make sure we give it to them.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that sometimes with finales, writers get a little bit, they spread themselves a little thin and try to cover too many bases and then neglect the things that we would actually really want to see.
Exactly.
And there are shows that are like ensemble cast, like, I don't know if you ever saw the finale for Parks and Rec. But
nope, still have barely seen the show.
There is, like, the cast for that show is huge. And they managed to basically hit every cast member in the finale. And yet it was still so well done. So it's not like it can't be done, but it's pretty difficult. I've seen very few finales that I was really happy with. But I don't even know what I was expecting going into this, really. I knew there was going to be a showdown, but, like, you know, we're not even halfway through the episode by the time Raylan's facing off with Boone. And I'm like, well, we know this isn't done. What the hell else is going to happen? And if you had told me, oh, they flash forward in the finale, I would have been like, I guess, sure. But that's the only thing you could have done. You had to do it that way. You have to skip over all this garbage in between that nobody really cares about. We just want to know, does it end up okay? Right. So yeah, in summary, 2 thumbs up. Natasha liked the finale.
All right.
Thanks for coming, everybody. You have a good night. Bye. What was that? That is not the theme song to this show that you just said.
That's the end of music of the episode.
Oh my god. That was so like one step away from
some kind of
show.
Needs to be an unspoiled freeze frame of the two of us laughing.
Oh my god. The thumbnail for this episode so far already I'm not happy with, so I hope it switches to something a little bit more flattering, because in the one that's up right now I'm going like this. So
but that's your natural state, though, so, you know,
Alan,
it's not really.
You want to rethink that? You want to think about what you just said, back it up a little bit, redo?
Nah, we're not recording next week. Would I care?
He's burning his bridges, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I mean, we should introduce ourselves, even though this is the last episode. So if you don't know who we are, I don't really know why you're here. But I'm Natasha.
And I'm Alan, and I'm happy you're here, even if we're meeting for the first time. Hello, friend.
Hi. Was that creepy enough? Welcome.
Yes. Ooh, and we get to do this. So I'm Alan, and I've seen all of Justified.
And I'm Natasha, and I've seen all of Justified as well.
Whoa!
I love that anybody watching for the first time would be like, yeah. They don't understand the significance of this at all. Brenton Harsh is here. Hi, Brenton.
Hello.
We have a viewer.
Yay.
So yeah, let's start off recapping this episode because I really want to talk about it.
Okay, great.
And I'm really pleasantly surprised at how gorgeous the picture quality is on my phone. Damn, I didn't expect this to be this good.
Yeah, so The Promise, Justified Season 6, Episode 13, written by Graham Yost, Fred Golan, Dave Andron, and Benjamin Cavell.
I'm sorry, can you say that faster this time, please? you flew through that.
It's Graham Graham Yost, Fred Golan, Dave Andron, and Benjamin Cavill. I'm not going to go through all of their bona fides because they've been with us for like 6 seasons now. Graham Yost, of course, is the creator. They're all awesome writers. And directed by Adam Arkin, who was Theo Tonin and is also proven himself to be a great director.
Yeah, definitely.
And we begin this episode where the last episode ended, with Raylan being led away by the Kentucky State Police.
Looking totally nonplussed that they were sicked on him.
Yes.
I really, he just straight up thought he was just going to be able to walk around and do whatever with nobody doing shit about it. I'm like, they were serious about this, Raylan. I really think he was thinking in his mind, oh, I'm calling their bluff and I just do whatever. And I'm like, buddy.
Yeah, and this deputy who does not know him, Lapicola, does not know him and has no interest in bantering with him, does not really care what he has to say. Mm-hmm. And does not see him as anything to anybody because
he doesn't know him like we know him.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny, actually. I appreciated very much that he's willing to constantly call Raylan out and be like, oh, you trying to remind me that you're a cop so that I'm cool with you? Because we're not cool like that. I don't know you. And Raylan later's like, ask her if he's like, you sit the fuck down or I'm going to put you in the fucking trunk. You know what, buddy? I'm kind of on your side on this. Raylan actually pipes down and seems like he's going to listen to him, which was surprising.
Well, and he does up until he sees another option to, to make a break for it, I guess, right. For lack of a better term. But, Raylan ends up in the back of the squad car. And we also get our, we set the scene with Boyd, who is at the cabin, and he is frantically looking for evidence of his money.
I almost felt bad for Boyd in this instant. Not really, because fuck Boyd, but also it feels almost like a bad dream, he's stuck somewhere. He thinks he knows it's here, but there's a very real possibility that money's not even there anymore. And that's you can't even think about that part when you're in his position, right? You have to assume it's here or else there's no limit to where the fuck it could be. Who knows?
Right.
And the way that he's just tearing the house apart and then he's trying to use his deductive reasoning. Oh, there's a patch of freshly dug earth over there. I bet they buried it.
Yeah.
Boyd, I get what you're thinking here, but do you really think they'd bother burying the money if it were only 15 feet away from the fucking front door of the house? I guess if they were in a complete state of emergency, that's the only option. But even so, it was just such a moment of wishful thinking on his part when he sees that and is like, oh, I bet I know. I'm like, you think about that for another 2 seconds and you're going to realize that this is probably not what's happening here. But,
I had a memory, and it clearly wasn't from the show, but it either was what I thought when I watched it the first time, or it's just something I grabbed from another show. But I thought I remembered that they had buried the money underneath the body. That they buried the money, threw the body on top of that, and then buried it. But clearly that's not the case because it never comes back up in the episode.
Interesting, though. I like that idea. I'm wondering, because that sounds familiar to me, too, now that you say that. And I'm like, was that a different, was that Breaking Bad or something?
Oh, I wonder.
That sounds familiar. Brenton, you're listening. What do you know? Brenton says it's weird watching a podcast recorded like this. I often wonder if people aren't a little frustrated sometimes when we do live shows and they watch them, but then that live show is what's released on iTunes later and they've already heard everything. So now there's no point in listening to it. But hopefully, you still want to hear us talk all over again about the exact same thing. I don't know.
I was at a convention earlier this summer where I got to watch a podcast record live, and then 3 weeks later it came out on the feed, and I was like, I was there. I remembered that joke.
Okay.
I was really excited about it, but I'm also a little strange. So
it makes me think of being in the audience at some late night show, and you're the one going, woo! And you were waiting to hear yourself. But I did that one time at Colbert Report, and I think I was too annoying and that they cut me. So when I listened to it later, I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm not on this.
I cannot imagine that. I cannot imagine it.
Look
I
how
can't
conscious he's being, guys.
I can't see our chat window, by the way. I don't know where it is.
Did you pop it out from the YouTube link?
Oh, that's what I didn't do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brenton says, I like listening to a podcast where I'm mentioned. Here it is. That's the one. Oh, and Ben Hamill's here. Hi, Ben. I've really noticed that almost everybody who interacts with us on this show, like on comments and whatnot, on Twitter, everywhere, is a dude. I haven't had a single female be like, oh, what's up? Really enjoy this show. It's been all guys. It's really kind of funny.
That's really weird.
Yeah, I think that I was talking about this on the cocktail hour a couple weeks ago, because $3 and up patrons get a monthly cocktail hour where I just basically like drink and talk to them. And I brought up Justified and how great the final season has been. And somebody was like, I feel about Justified the way I feel about Breaking Bad, in that I don't really want to sit here watching another privileged white dude get away with everything and just be a bad person. And I was like, okay, fair. But also, Walter White is like legit a bad guy. And Raylan is just kind of he's just not even a bad guy. He's just like, yeah, Raylan's kind of a dick, which is totally different.
I feel like he's tougher to classify. I really do. And I don't know that I have a good way to explain it. There's definitely a difference there, because at the end of the day, at least Raylan's trying to do the right thing, mostly. So I don't know. I guess I give him a pass that way. I
completely agree. I understood, and she hasn't seen either of them, so she's not really making a judgment call. But that I think was what she had heard about Justified, and I was like, I could understand that that's what people were reporting on it, because that was sort of my takeaway after the first season. I think was me just being like, if I were reading about the behavior of this cop in the news, I would want him taken out of the field because he sounds like a maniac. And, we have the benefit of being inside his head, but he still was, first season, he was way more out of control, and he starts to kind of like grow up. But, when you're sitting across from somebody poolside at a hotel, ready to just shoot him in the fucking chest, you maybe shouldn't be doing this as your line of work.
Yeah. That is somebody who has anger issues and probably shouldn't be a cop or a marshal, which is exactly what the show said.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we just watch him navigate his way to a place where he is better equipped to do his job. At least, that's the feeling that I have by the end of the episode.
Right. And Brenton Harsh is saying that he felt the same way about Sopranos, which, yes. The Sopranos was more difficult for me because, at least with Breaking Bad, I felt like there were a lot of characters that had been like caught in his net and his web that were being affected by him, that I cared about what happened to them, even if Walter himself was a piece of shit. In The Sopranos, I didn't really like almost anybody. Pretty much everybody on that, except for maybe his wife, his daughter later, but she's pretty annoying initially. Everybody's pretty unsympathetic. So The Sopranos was really tough for me in terms of like being invested in what happened to anybody, because they all seemed awful.
Yeah, I've heard that same thing. I've mentioned before how I haven't seen very much of The Sopranos, but most mafia movies tend to have that. They like to color the lifestyle. It's a very romantic portrait of the mafia most of the time. Even at the end, when things go wrong, the whole Goodfellas thing happens in most of them. There's still something that is, like you said, just white guys enjoying getting away with it and doing kind of whatever they want. And I can imagine if you're not a white guy, that gets old pretty quick.
Yeah, I think it gets old is really the key, because if it's a movie, that's only a couple hours of my time, and I have way more tolerance for that because I just want to see the story. But when it's a 7-season long, how many, 15 episodes per season or something like this, that's a lot of time to invest in people that I don't like. So I think that for me is really the thing, is I can deal with mafia movies a lot more easily. And not to say that Sopranos wasn't fascinating in its character studies, because it was really on point in terms of knowing who all of the people on that show were as people. But it's just a bummer, and nobody really seems to suffer. Like, the people that you want to see consequences don't seem to ever see them. And when I say the people I want to see consequences, I mean mostly Tony Soprano, and also fuck his fucking sister, because she's terrible and I hate her so much. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But I just find it an interesting comparison to bring up, because the anti-hero kind of thing has become a lot more of an accepted trope in the past. I recently covered Rebecca for the book club with Miles, and spoiler alert for Rebecca, a 70-year-old book at this point. But the man in Rebecca that she winds up marrying, it turns out he murdered his wife. And there's you kind of are supposed to sympathize with him, even though he's a little bit of an asshole, because his wife was even more of an asshole. But also, he killed his wife. So, and in the movie, apparently, you are not allowed to portray someone getting away with murder. So in the book, he gets away with it, and they just go on and live their lives. In the movie, she kills herself, or something happens and it's like an accident. And so I feel like that's a nice foil to show the difference between what we're okay with now. Somebody can literally get away with multiple murders per season now, and we're fine. But we used to have to change the endings of things because it just seemed a little too shady that guy got away with that murder, even though the person he murdered was questionable in the first place, I just find it really interesting, and I like it. I feel like we've come a long way in terms of accepting human nature and wanting to actually explore what people are really like. So I approve of this.
Yeah. And I think I've heard before regarding The Sopranos that, not that it's not a great show, but because it was one of the first shows, modern shows, to do what it did in telling the large form serialized story and deep character analysis of antiheroes and things like that, that it gets a lot of credit that maybe it doesn't 100% deserve, just because of when it did it.
I really agree with that. And I think that's just, that's going to be a thing. I hate to use this example because I fully admit that the show still holds up, but something like The Simpsons, a cartoon that's really written for adults and has a lot of current event type commentary, whatever. And it sure still holds up, but there are so many things that have done it since then that it doesn't feel revolutionary anymore when you watch it. It's still great. I'm really pleasantly surprised at how much I've been enjoying it because I never watched it, and Owen's making me watch it.
Go ahead, Owen.
And I'm glad he is, because we're going to Universal and there's a whole Simpsons world in Universal that I did not give any shits about the other 2 times I've been to Universal. So now I'm going to be actually interested in that part, and you better believe I'm going to get a donut the size of my head at Lard Lad or whatever. Oh my God, they look amazing. Yeah, Brenton's saying I wouldn't have minded it as much if with The Sopranos being full of assholes if Tony at least had some more consequences. Yeah, Tony really skates by, and I think most people kind of wanted that because they really did sympathize with him more than I did personally. So I think more people were probably satisfied with that in a general way, although I know that the actual finale was panned by many people. I think it was brilliant personally, but I'm really surprised though, Alan, that you haven't seen it, considering that Goodfellas is isn't that your favorite movie?
It is my favorite movie. Yeah. Again, it's just one of those things that I've never quite got around to. I have started the first season 3 different times, and I've never gotten to the end of it just because stuff came up. It wasn't not that I disliked it. I wasn't bored by it. Just life stuff happened all 3 times.
Yeah.
And And I said in college, I had a friend of mine whose father would videotape The Sopranos and mail the VHS tape to campus every week.
That's so funny. I forgot you said that.
And yeah, so we would watch it a few days after it aired every week, right up until the second to last episode of the second season. And that's when like we went on break or something. And I've
Right.
never seen the end of season 2 and then nothing since then. And I've seen the very end of the finale also, just because it was everywhere and I didn't care. So I decided to watch it anyway.
Oh, you did. Okay. So you know.
And
what
so
I'm
I do
talking
actually know how it ends, even if I have zero context for it. I know a little bit of context, but not enough to speak intelligently about it.
I feel like, and I'm sorry, this isn't a Sopranos show, but I feel like, this is the finale of an anti-hero show, and bringing other shows into it makes sense right now. So forgive me, guys.
Yes.
But the ending of The Sopranos, to me, the whole deal with Sopranos is that even though there's a ton of action, it's very violent. A lot of the show is sort of mundane in a weird way. You're just seeing ordinary moments in people's lives, and these people just happen to be trash. And so it's almost circumstantial, that there's like really crazy shit happening. So for me, the way that it ended with him just sitting and eating, and this long, almost like David Lynch like shot of them just sitting there, and you're not sure what you should be feeling about this right now. I felt like it suited the whole series in general. Just there is a sense of, well, I'm not making a judgment call on this. You look at them and you tell me. And I think that was the right call for the ending, because there's no way to put a button on a story about real people's lives when they're still alive. Like they're still living as a family, and they're still, going on with their days. And I don't feel like there was a good way to end that and have it not feel artificial with it, like in comparison to the tone of the rest of the whole show,
Yeah, well, it undermines the entire thing if you take a moral stand on the characters. If they've spent 7 seasons not doing that, that's what the movie Blow with Johnny Depp.
I never saw that.
It's essentially like they wanted to do Goodfellas. It's Goodfellas almost beat for beat, except at the end of the movie, they do everything in their power to make Johnny Depp a sympathetic character, like down to, like they freeze frame on the last thing and they give you text about what happened to the real guy, and they paint him in the most sympathetic light you are. So you're so sorry for him. And it ruins the idea of, again, Goodfellas is like, here's this guy and the people he's mixed up in, and here's what they did. What do you think? And
interesting. Okay.
I just find that whole movie undermines itself, because otherwise it's a really fun movie, and they just fuck it up in the last 20 minutes, and then especially with the very last scene, because they editorialize. And they tell you how you should feel.
The producers thought he wasn't relatable enough, and they tacked that on. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Kind of doing a Rebecca thing where they're like, well, we can't let him get away with this. So what if we make him cool? And Brenton is saying Breaking Bad had Jesse Pinkman, and he's really likable. So I was watching mainly to see what happens to him, which I'm pretty sure by that point, most of us wanted Jesse to make it out okay. You're just like, for fuck's sake, this poor kid, So you guys should listen to the Breaking Bad feed, because it's a little odd, because my marriage implodes about 5 episodes short of the actual finale. So I had to finish the show with Nina, who does podcast fandom.
And if I remember correctly, in the last episode you and Brendan did together, it ends with him saying, and that's going to be the last episode ever of Breaking Bad.
I forgot. Oh, that's true. That is what happened.
And then you went on hiatus for 3 months while you figured out what was going on with the two of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really, really weird. I was watching that show with you, and then I went oh my God, the show's over. This is terrible. And I just binged the last 10 episodes.
And some people who were on the inside and knew that I was talking to Owen while everything was imploding. There's an episode of Breaking Bad where it's clear Brennan and I are talking about our own marriage, even though really we're talking about Skylar and Walter. And there was a few people I'm not even sure Brennan realized at the moment that we were talking about our own marriage. But if you go back and listen, it's very clearly I'm getting irate because he doesn't seem to understand why somebody would do a certain thing. And I'm like, well, I get it. And it got a little personal. Brenton says, I listened to it all through twice. I really like that podcast. Well, thank you, Brenton. Good. I'm glad somebody listens to it still. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about this fucking show.
Justified.
Sorry. God. It's been like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Oops. So yeah, we have Boyd ripping the cabin apart, looking for money, and finally he comes outside to smoke a cigarette, and he sees a recently used shovel, and he gets inspiration.
Right.
And then we go to kind of our third group of people. We go to the Bennett's drying shed, which is not a place we've seen in a while.
I know. I was just like, oh, I guess we're doing this again.
Yeah. And Avery is there with Boone and Loretta. And Ava gets brought into him by the dirty cops who picked her up at the end of last episode. And she gives everything up with very little pretense. Like, she kind of knows she's screwed.
I liked this. I liked the way that she played the whole thing because Avery is not somebody to fuck with. And I just am glad that she has the sense to see that. Yeah.
And so, but she says, like, the money is buried on the property. And she also tells him, after, again, very little prodding, that Uncle Zachariah is up there, but he had nothing to do with actually stealing the money. He just didn't want me to see me hurt. Please leave him alone.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets our scene and takes us to our opening credits. Hey, look, we got to the opening credits.
Finally. Jesus.
When we come back to from credits, Tim and Rachel, they get their Tommy Lee Jones moment as they are organizing the manhunt for Boyd and Ava.
Hen house, farmhouse, outhouse in that area.
And, yeah, it's so good. And it turns out that we talked about the gator tooth necklace and how unlikely it would be that someone would just find that. But they give a decent explanation, I thought, that dog teams were tracking Ava, and they tracked her to this place, and they found this necklace and went nuts. And that makes a lot more sense to me. I can buy that.
Yeah, it didn't even occur to me about using dogs because that's something that I always think of as being kind of an antiquated practice, but it's not. We totally still use them for like a ton of stuff. Things that I don't even remember. Like I know that we have drug sniffing dogs, but I always forget we have bomb sniffing dogs as well.
Right.
So yeah, that didn't even occur to me, but it makes complete sense. Your typing sounds insane.
Sorry. They're talking about the Shield in chat, and I was just saying that it's been on my list for forever to watch, but I've heard everyone on the show is just a terrible person, and there's no one to root for. It's essentially. Okay. So someday I will get to it. I really do want to because I've never heard anything but high praise for the Shield, which also has Walton Goggins in it. And now I've gotten to the point where like you tell me he's in something and I'm on it. Right? He's going to be in the new Tomb Raider. Did you see that? I didn't see that. I know he's going to be in Ant-Man, I think. And, really? Oh, that's I think so. But yeah, he is one of those actors. I think that most people don't really know who he is because he hasn't broken out, but he is going to. There's no way that someone is not going to find him and put him front and center in something. And it really like gives me hope too. Because how old do you think he is? And he's like finally coming into his own now. Yeah, I mean, he's middle-aged. It makes me so, like, it gives me a lot of hope because I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, I'm trying and I still haven't gone anywhere and how long is this going to take? And then I realized, like, I saw somewhere the other day that, was it Donna Karan didn't design her first dress until she was like 40 or somebody like this? Well, that, not to cut you off, but there's something that was a few years old at this point, but it was something I'd never forgotten that I loved when I heard it, that Spider-Man turned 50 this year. Stan Lee turned 90 this year. That means he didn't create Spider-Man until he was 40. Wow. Which means you have not even begun to live your life yet. That's very reassuring. That makes me happy. Appreciate that. Brenton's asking if we've seen Vice Principals, which Walton Goggins is on. I have not, but it's like one of those things that I always forget about. And then I see previews before other shows and I'm like, oh, right. I started it and I really obviously I love Walton Goggins. I really like Eastbound and Down guy whose name was escaping me. And I saw the pilot, thought it was really funny. Amanda saw it and went, yeah, you can watch that on your own. And I haven't had the chance to go back and finish it, but I really want to.
Damning. All right, so back to the show.
Yes. So they have, they found this dog tooth necklace with dog teams, gator tooth necklace with dog teams.
Mm-hmm.
Raylan hears about it in the back of the squad car, and he convinces the guy to turn it in, to call it in. Thank you, and ask if it's gator teeth. He says, they tell him probably, at least, that they're sharp as hell.
Right.
And then Raylan tries to use this as his opening to go like, okay, so now we're going to, and he gets shut down so hard.
Yep.
That, it's just, there's no talking to this guy. Raylan he's bucked. He's in custody, and he's not used to being treated like a criminal.
Welcome
right.
to there.
Right. Despite 6 seasons of not entirely unlike criminal behavior.
That's a really interesting alternate name for this show. Not entirely unlike criminal behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing if not direct. We go back to the cabin, and this is where Boyd finds Grooves. He's digging into the earth feverishly for money, just digging with his hands. And he thinks he finds something, and he puts his fingers right into Grooves' skull.
Oh, gross.
Which is just a lovely metaphor for Boyd, who is just digging and digging and digging for his riches and coming up with nothing but death.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I love how he stops and he's horrified and kind of screams, but then he starts laughing because it seems like he sort of recognizes that about himself for a second. He's just like, oh, of course it's a fucking body. Jesus.
Yeah. And it's also coincidentally the same place where Ava fell over laughing last episode. So could just be a really funny gravesite.
That's what it is.
Could be. So then, almost inexplicably, he hears the phone ringing from inside the cabin. Again, when they get into these places, I forget that it's still, 2013 or whatever year it was when this was all happening.
Yeah.
So, he did actually have a phone because it's the 21st century. And he goes back in the cabin to pick it up, and it is Ava, who has this veiled conversation with him because on the other line is, or just next to her, rather, is Avery.
And she's pretending she's on the phone with her uncle.
Thank you. Why could I not get that sentence out? And this is her explaining to Boyd why he really should pay attention to her and let her live without actually having to say that, out loud.
And I really have to admit that at this moment, as angry as I knew Boyd was, and as much as I knew that he thought he meant it at that point, that he would kill her, I did not think he really meant it. So later when he goes ahead and pulls that trigger, I was a tiny bit horrified.
Yeah.
I really was. I was just like, oh, I thought, And I think it's the kind of thing where if there had been a bullet, he would have immediately regretted what he did.
I think so. And I think you were just talking last episode about how we've never really seen Boyd do something that he's regretted, even if it's something he didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder what kind of line this was for him. And we're not quite at that scene yet, but that really is sort of Boyd kind of has the same choice that Raylan has a few, seconds later.
Yeah.
And he chooses to shoot her dead, except he's out of bullets.
The sound that she makes. Ugh. We'll get there. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
So they had this conversation where essentially boils down to Boyd tells her to tell Avery to send one unarmed man to Compass Rock, where Uncle Zachariah, in air quotes, is going to give them the location of the money. And instead, Markham completely disregards all of those instructions and sends Boone with Loretta to guide him. And then make sure you get all of it and then kill him.
Oh, man, it's so smart. Boyd knows that he's not going to listen at all. And it's just like, yeah, you go ahead and send all your guys. Sure, you do that, buddy. Whatever. You think you're sticking it to me. It's like, Damn, that was a pretty good move, buddy.
We go then back to the the state police, like, it's like a substation or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now the next morning, so it's been hours since, all of this stuff has been taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And Art has run into, did I say, Raylan?
No, that's like, it's Art and Raylan.
And that is the first time we see Raylan. Okay, so, no, we did miss the scene where Art comes and takes and asks to take Raylan. Or did we talk about that?
Yeah, but that's not
Raylan. All right. Yeah. No, but, okay, so we jumped over that scene, but Art has gone into the barracks to talk to the state police and take custody of Raylan away from them because he wants to turn him in himself. At least that's what he says. And once they're in the SUV, Raylan starts immediately digging in on all of the stuff that's going on. And it's all bullshit. Why are we doing this? And Art finally pulls over and thinks. Mm-hmm. And ultimately opens up the glove compartment and throws him his stuff and says, "There, you dumb son of a bitch." Now, I like the fact that despite like how incredibly incriminating everything really does look, like I said, you understand where Vasquez is coming from. If you step back and look at the evidence that he has, it looks really bad. But I love that it's not even really a question in Art's mind. It's just a question of whether I want to take the risk on by doing this. It's not whether or not he's guilty, because he knows perfectly well that that's not the case. So, and it's also Raylan getting the comeuppance that he kind of sort of has deserved for a little while now. Mm-hmm. This is Raylan finally paying for everything, but right at this moment, is this really what's best? Is just to satisfy Art's personal
grudge, a little
wish for Raylan to face some consequences? Exactly. Do you think that Art had this intention in the back of his head when he took custody of Raylan, or was he really just here to get him back to the station?
I don't think so. I think not just that he was going to get him back to the station, but I think he wanted to lambast him a little bit privately.
Yeah.
I think that was the main thing, was like, I want to get this asshole alone for a second because I have some shit to say. And then once it came down to it and Raylan forced him to look at his priorities, he was like, fine, Jesus. Like, he's never going to get to yell at Raylan, clearly. Like, by the end of the season, he still hasn't really gotten a satisfying moment of just like, go fuck yourself.
Laying into him, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, he does ultimately give Raylan all of his stuff back. And they are right back to being partners after that. It's not even like, I'm still in charge. They're just like, nope, all right, you're back on the force. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those things why when they jump 4 years, it's probably for the best, because no doubt there was, at the very least, a lot of paperwork to fill out after today. So
can you imagine?
Thankfully we don't have to. Yeah. So after Raylan gets his badge and gun back, we go back to the cabin where we don't see Boyd. Instead, we see Tim and Rachel and the marshals as they are converging on the cabin and take the front door, only to find the place deserted because Boyd is up on the ridge watching all of them, having just barely escaped.
Yeah, I mean, like, when we saw Boyd first taking the cabin apart, it was pitch dark. Then when he's digging, it's really pale gray light, early morning. He's been there a long time. He should have been gone a bit before this, but I think he didn't realize that Raylan had been there before him. So there's like not only a trail from Ava to follow, but like Raylan could have just told them where it was too. And I don't think he really knows that. So
well, I also think he's blinded by the idea of $9 million somewhere in the area. But yeah, he barely makes it out. And then as soon as he makes a move, one of the other marshals sees him, and this ends with him taking off, running up the mountain under a hail of gunfire.
And the best thing so far on this show, I think, which is him chucking lit sticks of dynamite over his shoulder like he's Wile fucking... Like, it was just so cartoonish, and yet it was not in a bad way. I was just like, I guess you got to do what you got to do. Like, it's just so ridiculous.
But, I love again, going back to that very first episode, this really boils Boyd down to his essence. What did he do when he was first meeting him? He was robbing banks and blowing shit up.
True.
And when you get right down to it, it is him scrambling away from a horde of police, chucking dynamite behind him.
True.
And I love the way that encapsulates him. He's obviously, there's a lot more complex than that. But at the same time, that's back to basics Boyd.
Yeah, I mean, the complexity gets lost once you start to like boil him down to a concentrate, and nothing boils you down like running from the cops.
Yeah, it starts to lose some of the detail when you boil it down to giant red sticks of dynamite with a lit fuse on top.
I loved Raylan's reaction when Art tells him that. And he just snorts and goes, Jesus Christ. It's like, correct reaction, sir.
Exactly. So back with Art and Raylan, they go into a bar, and it turns out that this is a cop bar. Where
I didn't know this was a thing.
Me neither. But apparently this is a place where it's only for off-duty cops or people with a pair of tits. And you have to have one or the other if you want to stay.
All right, Art. Show them your tits.
Show them your tits. They are here. And in addition to that, they need to give up their guns.
Oh, right. And they really sort of look like they don't buy that shit at all. Like,
yes, but at the same time, that also gives them a good reason to be able to do this to an off-duty cop and have nobody like draw their gun at him.
True.
You know, because the place isn't empty.
No, yeah.
But
there's not that
no
many
one's
people,
getting in
but
their way.
there's a few.
But it's it turns out Styles is here, who's the guy that we saw get pistol whipped into unconsciousness a few episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out he is still really, really concussed. So they're able to interrogate him without actually touching him.
This is so satisfying. I swear to God, because fuck that guy. And they didn't have to touch him, and it was so good. I loved it. They
take the baseball bat away from the bartender and just smash it into the bar because he's very sensitive to light and sound right now, and he sells how much this hurts.
It's funny that you specifically addressed that, because I thought that after I watched this the first time, was like, man, that actor really made me feel how bad that hurt him. Like, he got that across. I liked it a lot. Yeah.
So only one or two hits to the bar, and he is very quickly giving up everything that they need to know.
Oh man, fuck that guy.
Brenton just said that he's seen the bartender and other stuff, and I was thinking the same thing. I didn't look him up before this, but he's definitely been in stuff. I really recognize him, even though it's such a tiny bar.
He was in The Fast and the Furious, Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay, L.A. Confidential, and The Purge.
I have seen all of those movies, so I probably just recognize him from, places.
Thank you, Amazon X-Ray.
Woo! Yeah, this has actually been paused at the opening credits since we started talking. I never restarted it. Oops. Yeah. Quick, let's go on a tangent for about 18 minutes or so, and then I'll be caught up.
Where I'm at is minute 16:25 is where we're at. Raylan and Art discovering that Boyd's throwing dynamite. And Art has to basically turn around and go there now because shit's hit the fan and he has to be available.
Right, and he leaves Raylan to go and to do his Raylan thing. They've been told about this, the drying barn at the Bennett's, and he says, okay. He gives them the keys and says, no matter what you find at that drying shed, whatever they've done to Ava and Loretta, you can't finish the sentence.
Yep, he's just kind of accepting the fact that this is something Raylan needs to decide for himself.
Yeah.
He can't tell him, hey, don't be an asshole, because this is the man's life.
He is an asshole.
Well, that as well. True. But this is Raylan going after Boyd. Everybody recognizes that this is a Clash of the Titans sort of situation.
Yeah.
That they are each really focused on the other and thinking of the other every time they pull some shit. And there is no way to approach I don't want to say someone's life's work because that feels like almost overstating it, but it is sort of in a way. Just like, this is the guy you've been after since practically day one. And I know that I don't really get to tell you how to handle this, even though I'm your boss, even though that's really my whole job is to tell you how to handle this. Really, I can't do that. That's on you in the end. And I liked that a lot.
This is the moment in every other action movie ever made where they say, no, he's got to do this himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Raylan just says, I understand. And gets in the SUV. Now, back at the barn, Avery gets a call from Boone that Zachariah was not at Compass Rock. And
he's starting to catch on that somebody's played his ass a little bit.
Yeah, and he angrily ends the call and then begins to turn all of that on Ava.
Mm-hmm.
And winds up, he tells her, he goes back to when they first met and says, like, I remember when I told you, a woman in this line of work needs to be at least as good as the man, twice as tough, really.
Mm-hmm.
And you definitely seem to be that person. And I know this isn't the first time you've had a gun pointed at your face, but have you ever had one directly under your chin? Because that is what is about to happen. And I don't think that you know.
I like how he starts to unravel here.
Yes.
Even his hair is starting to come like undone from its little careful coif. But yeah, he is really like, he says specifically because one of the cops wants to know why he's sending Boone with him. And he's like, well, do you not trust me? And he's like, I don't trust anybody anymore. And it turns out he could have not trusted anybody a whole lot harder than he did, because he trusts Ava at least a little bit, and he should not have done that. Which is kind of funny, because otherwise she's telling him the entire truth, but it's just the fact that Boyd, and she didn't know what Boyd's plan was. He said, meet him at Compass Rock. She told him Compass Rock. Sure, it wasn't Zachariah, but still, it's she isn't aware of what the overall plan is or how Boyd is planning on double crossing him. I'm sure she can figure it out because she knows Boyd, but still, she's told him as close to the truth as she can.
Yes, exactly.
So,
exactly. She's just taken the tiniest opportunity to possibly turn the tables, maybe if this goes the way that she wants it to go. But it really is, she's cooperating almost 100%. She's cooperating like 95%.
Yeah.
It's a big 5% that she's missing, but.
And for her, that's a huge percentage, because
yes,
she's not the type to do that. So he should kind of feel gratified, I think, that she's cooperated as much as she has.
Agreed. But they do this pistol under your chin thing, and it's a pretty terrifying moment. He really does. He's done a very good understated scary for the whole season, and like you said, he's a bit unraveled, and he comes a lot more to the surface as just what a cold, vicious son of a bitch he is.
Mm-hmm.
But before that goes too far, the door opens behind him, and it is Officer Birch being led at gunpoint by Boyd, who is not within the perimeter that the KSP have set up.
No. Yeah.
So
this, I don't know how he did this.
But I can accept that he did it. At least I can.
That's fair. I can also accept it, but it does feel a little magic-y.
I guess, yes, it is a little magic-y. It is kind of hand-wavy and kind of just go with us, please.
Right, yeah.
But if they really want to boil this episode down to who these people are, Boyd is the guy who would get out of that circle of cops slowly encroaching on him.
That's true, yeah.
So I'm okay with it. We don't need the scene where he gets away.
I'm just picturing him climbing a tree and jumping like a winged squirrel from tree to tree above their heads without them noticing, like some kind of spider monkey.
See, I like that better. I was thinking Shia LaBeouf in the fourth Indiana Jones movie.
Oh, is that the worst?
It is the worst of the worst.
I hated that movie so much anyway, but I was sitting watching it in the theater, and I when he starts to do that, I just went, oh my God. Like, I was so pissed. Oh,
You know,
what a waste.
I didn't hate the movie when I first saw it. I really didn't. I was writing movie reviews at the time, and I gave it a pretty positive review. I did. I was able to overlook a lot, and I still think there are things in the movie that work. But yeah, it didn't take a whole lot of repeat viewings to realize just how thin that movie is, and how much the flaws don't excuse the places where it gets it right.
Yeah, and like Cate Blanchett is someone that I really want to be. I want to love Cate Blanchett more than she actually deserves, I think. Because her as a villain in that and in Ragnarok, I was like, oh, so close. It just didn't quite. Ragnarok, don't get me wrong, was still fucking awesome and I loved it. But her as a villain, just not quite. Not really. Not quite. But I always like when I see her still like kind of squeal with glee, even though she hasn't really proved herself to me in a while. So I just give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't know why.
No, that's it. I feel like she's gotten famous, like since The Lord of the Rings, basically. She has gotten famous, and so she gets offered more things like Thor or Indiana Jones, where you kind of jump at the chance because it's a nice payday and it's a big name, and the material maybe isn't so fantastic. So instead of this really this really slim but really excellent body of work that's very high regard, very like small indie pictures and like meaty roles with complexities to them, gets diluted. Yeah. Especially when you have these. There
are so few really like over the top female villains that I understand as soon as you see that being like, oh yes, I fucking want to do this. I really get the drive. But yeah, the thing that I fell in love with her really was when she was in Elizabeth. Did you see Elizabeth?
I did see Elizabeth. Yeah, I never saw the sequel, but
it's not entirely historically accurate, of course. But God, it's close enough that I still really enjoyed it, and she's so good in that.
Yeah, if I wanted historically accurate, I'd watch a documentary. I'm very much of the Aaron Sorkin school of thought, which is if there's the history or there's a good story, I'm going to go with the good story. It doesn't bother me. Same reason I still like Braveheart. It doesn't bother me that the movie is nothing like reality.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I do have a problem with the towns in Scotland creating a statue of William Wallace and making it look like Mel Gibson as opposed to looking like actual William Wallace. Yeah, okay. That's a thing that happened in the 90s. Yeah, there are statues of Mel Gibson in his Braveheart outfit in honor of William Wallace.
I've heard that those costumes are like wildly inaccurate. Like not
there was
not just a little, but like the equivalent of wearing like a tuxedo jacket backwards, kind of inaccurate.
Well, they didn't wear kilts at that time, and so there's no tartan, there's no, it's the movie is a mess if you want to try to go to actual history, but it's just an enjoyable movie, and that that counts for a lot for me.
So Boyd gets past the guards.
So,
the cops.
Right, Boyd getting past guards. Good for him. And
he walks in, and I feel a little bad for Avery in this moment because when he looks up and realizes Boyd is right there, you could tell he just really wants to raise that gun. This fucker again, really, like just how pissed he must be. Oh my God.
Yeah. But he controls himself and he said, I suppose this means Uncle is dead and you don't have my cash. And Boyd says, for a bona fide stoner, you're awful quick. And I like other people acknowledging that he's a giant stoner and seems to go through his entire life in just a haze of pot smoke.
I wish that we saw him smoking more. Like, I wish that he was smoking weed in this scene, It's like kind of a weird thing to pair with him, but I still kind of like it. And I wish that we got to see a little bit more of it. But then we jump to the cop as a meat shield, like almost immediately.
They sure do. Things go south really, really fast. And Avery says, you did this hostage thing before, and last time you picked a good choice. This time, not so much. He does not give a shit about this guy, so he just shoots through him. And,
I get why Boyd did what he did, but I think he should have anticipated that one a little bit more, which maybe he did because he has the guy in front of him so that he doesn't take the hit. So maybe he did.
Yes. Yeah, but Birch is, like you said, meat shield. And Boyd unloads, he shoots down the other cop, and then he shoots Avery through the eye, very graphically.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
It was really unexpected how, without ceremony, Avery died. You know, there's no showdown, like the showdown with, you know, for example, Raylan and Boone later on, where there's a slow kind of walk around each other and who's going to make the first move. It happens really quick.
Yeah.
But I think I would rather see that, you know.
I don't think the episode had room for two of those. I think it really would have killed the tension of the second one.
Agreed.
But I also, that the show's done that before. They did it last season with the Mexican gangsters, and the three of them out on the front porch with Tim and Rachel. And the lead guy doesn't go down last. He goes down second.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's one of the no-name guys ends up being the final person to, cause trouble for them. So, yeah, I like it because it's unexpected. And truthfully, at the end of the day, Avery doesn't matter. He's been a cool complication to the season, but do we really care that much about him? And do we really care? He was going to end up dead, so let's just kill him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am, because I think at the beginning of this season, it took a little while for us to find out who Avery was and that he was behind some of the other stuff that was happening. And initially I was like, I really hope that they don't just introduce a whole new crime family all of a sudden. And they kind of did, especially in trying to establish that Avery is someone people know, which I found the retconning of that to be a little bit too much. I don't think it was necessary. But I do like that we did need someone else gumming up the works. And Sam, I mean, how do you go wrong with Sam Elliott? You know, he just pulls this off so well.
Yes, and the show has been, it's more than this, but it's been a modern-day Western. And if you're going to do a Western and you have access to Sam Elliott, you better use Sam Elliott.
Yeah, agreed.
So, yeah, Ben Hamill says, "You damn hillbilly."
Oh my God.
Which is a quote I like. And Brent says, I like how Avery died because there was no big show. Because, it really wasn't that. He really wasn't that important at the end of the day. And it sets up this confrontation. This is, like you said, 20 minutes into the episode, our final confrontation between Boyd and Raylan, where it's just the three of them now in the barn. And, actually, I just breezed right by Boyd and Ava's moment.
Yeah, Boyd.
Where it's just two of them. Yeah.
That I know I said it already, but that really shocked me.
Yeah.
That was fucked up. And that was a great moment to include to make me not feel remotely bad about the decision that Ava makes later on.
Right.
She's 100% on point.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, like we were saying, that's Boyd. That's him making his choice. At the end of the day, he did not choose. He was not here for this. And then when Raylan comes in the door, second time someone has walked through that door and interrupted something very dramatic going on.
Right.
And he says, "God damn, Raylan, your timing sucks."
Oh, he's so mad.
So I've been told. And then they have the ideological showdown of the episode. I guess. And this is exactly what Raylan wanted, honestly.
This annoyed me, though, I got to admit, because...
Okay, why?
And mostly I understand it because Raylan wasn't there a second earlier to see that Boyd actually pulled the trigger on Ava. But even if he hadn't seen that happen, handing Boyd a new gun to use when she's still in the building and just shot him a couple days earlier is a fucking irresponsible ass thing to do. Whether or not you think you can shoot him before he shoots you, he could turn around and pop her. And you have to live with that because you put the weapon in his hands like a fucking dirtbag. So while I appreciate that he doesn't actually wind up taking Boyd out, and he could have easily framed the whole thing up to make it look neat as a pin, as they say, I still feel really bitter about the fact that Ava is just so fucking not a factor to either of these dudes, really, in the end.
It's true.
As you know, as much as Boyd's like, oh well, I know that you really loved her, and yeah, I totally loved her. Just you guys both don't care about her. Stop it. And it just bothered me that it doesn't even seem to enter his mind. The only thing he says is, Ava, you probably want to get out of the way. Maybe say that before you give him the fucking gun. You know, like, I don't know. I just got real mad about it. Brenton says, I didn't like this. The only thing in the episode I didn't like. Yeah, agreed.
No, I mean, I guess that's fair. I think, I know we talked last time about the idea of Boyd as a dark mirror and how we've kind of gotten over that. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they care about Ava the same amount. As much as they care about her, there is something that they care about more. And they care about the fate of they care about each other more than they care about her ultimately. Yeah. Which is something they come back to at the very end of the episode. But again, we'll get there. But yeah, he
just,
does.
Like, I know, I understand. I just feel like the show owed her more than it gave her. After this, once they wrap it up, I feel like they kind of redeemed themselves a little bit. But at this point, I was really fucking pissy about it, I got to admit. So, but anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, that's I totally get that, and I do think, yeah, you're right. They do. Her career as a criminal comes to a pretty unceremonious end here, and they've spent a long time building it up. So I can understand that. I guess I don't feel quite as passionately about it as you do, but I get it. Yeah, they have their showdown, and Raylan makes sure he's got a loaded gun on him.
Yep.
And Boyd tells him, I am not going to draw on you, so either shoot me down or take me in, but know if you take me in, someday I'm getting out, and I'm going to come for her, and then I'm going to come for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we cut away. We don't see Raylan make his decision, and instead we cut to the aftermath.
Right.
With Boyd and Ava being led away.
Yeah,
and
that was
so
a little abrupt, and I'm fine with it because it turns out that there was so much more remaining in the episode. But at the moment that it happened, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I guess that he didn't. Like, it just felt a little abrupt. But now it makes sense.
It is a little abrupt. But yeah, because it really, I think, as we talked, I think the show kind of recognized, like, okay, let's settle this question now, and then let's give ourselves a little bit of time to breathe. Right. Because at the end of the day, it really is about what happens to these people, not just how does this particular plot wrap up. But yeah, so they end it really quickly, and it goes right to like a half hour later.
Yeah,
Boyd's led away, and Raylan agrees to take Ava down for processing, and they have a conversation. Their last sort of conversation together, alone in his town car. She wonders if there's still a deal to be made. There is not.
I mean, it's you gotta ask, right? What harm is that going to do?
At this point, what really is that going to add to anything else?
He's like, "Oh, you're going to try and bribe me now?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah! Why the fuck not?"
Right?
She's going to jail. She knows that. Like, come on.
And she asks a reasonable question after this. She says, "Like, why didn't you just kill him? You hurt him. You know there ain't a cell that can keep him. What's to prove letting him live?" Mm-hmm. And his answer is just, maybe nothing. But it meant something to him. So
that's the thing, is what's to prove is it's private. What's to prove.
Yeah.
He just doesn't need to tell her about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think she's right. Boyd's getting out of there. Even though by the end, 3 years later, he's still there, he'll be out of there. It's fine. But
I would be very disappointed if that wasn't the case.
Right.
Yeah. Until he's in that Supermax prison in Colorado, he's getting out. So yeah, they continue driving, and we hear the "You'll never leave Harlan alive" as they leave Harlan. And then right after they pass the town line, we see a big silver pickup truck racing up the road behind them.
I totally forgot about Boone. You know, there's so much happening.
Absolutely.
So I was like, all right, who is this? Like, I couldn't think.
And then you go like, oh, right.
Yeah. And once it's, and I was super excited about it. Like, I'm totally here for it. I kind of wish it wasn't over as fast as it was. I want it to last a little bit longer.
Yeah, I do like, before we get there, I like what we get, though. I like what we get. I like they ran the car. I like Raylan's super awesome 180 degree like spin turn stop thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, I like their little showdown, their little, their conversation ahead of time, and just this idea of the aging gunslinger and the guy who has come to take him down. And again, it's that modern day Western thing. It's so well done. And I thought there was a real chance. I do absolutely believe Justified as a show that might kill Raylan off in the last 20 minutes.
I'm sorry, Brenton's in the chat going, while I loved the boob stuff, and he meant to say boob, but for a second I was like, the boob stuff? What the fuck did I miss? I'm sure you did love the boob stuff, Brenton. Sorry. Anyway, that was distracted me for a moment.
But so yeah, I thought there was a real chance here that Raylan, they might kill him off.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I did. I thought this season's been hinting so heavily at, again, death and closure and letting go, and that idea of the aging gunslinger. And if this is who you're going to live your life as, there's always going to be someone who's gunning for you. And it is
gunning for you.
But honestly, kind of like that end of The Sopranos thing that I'm not qualified to talk about, of you never know who's going to be knocking at that door.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be food delivery, or it could be the cops, or it could be another gang.
Right.
And Raylan if this is the way Raylan's going to live his life, there's always going to be someone who wants to prove that they're better than him.
Right.
So I thought it entirely plausible. And when they fire, you see like serious blood coming out of the back of Raylan's head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I wasn't really worried about Raylan. I didn't think he was going to die. Like, if they did, it wouldn't have felt out of place to me, but I would have been surprised. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
I would have been like, oh, okay, you know what? That works. But I still would have been like, huh, well, all right. But really, for me, I mostly felt like I would have expected him. I would have been more worried about him if he had been facing anyone other than Boone.
Really? Okay.
Because Boone is too much of a bad guy for them to let Raylan go down to him. If they were going to have him die, it would be facing off with somebody like Art. Doing something that he's not really supposed to do and just taking it too far because he thinks he can. And it would have to be one of his own people finally being like, you need to fucking stop. You don't know when to stop. That's what I feel like would be an acceptable death for him.
Interesting.
But not somebody like Boone.
See, because I see that being an acceptable end to his story if his story ends with him getting kicked off the force. I don't see that ending with him dying.
I don't see him getting kicked off. He has to get killed. If he doesn't leave this job.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm saying if that's the direction they were going to take the story, though, that is what would happen in my mind. Is it would have to someone he works with finally, puts it down. I only see him dying from someone like Boone, or if you really want to go this way, some no-name nobody, some 2-bit thug on a bad day,
Honestly, the only other person I could see actually like maybe really taking him out would be somebody like Loretta. Somebody who is just, he's underestimating a little bit still.
Yeah. And I'm also, speaking of Loretta, so she's here. She's in the truck with Boone, right where we left her. And after the shooting where both men fall, she is the one who keeps her boot on Boone's hand to stop him from doing anything else. But then we don't ever see her again.
Yeah. Was that weird to you? Because that was a little weird to me.
I am surprised that she didn't get the curtain call that everyone else got in like the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that they didn't like wrap up her story.
Mm-hmm.
I find, she could go straight and realize like, yeah, this was bad for me and I don't really want to do this. Or she could end up being the next Mags Bennett. I like the idea that like she is representative of Harlan, and Harlan is Harlan is Harlan, and it always will be. And
yeah, I guess it's not really like, I don't need them to wrap up her story or even like really necessarily explicitly tell us where she is. But for that to be the last thing we see of her felt strange.
I appreciate that she got to put her, she got to end with her, foot planted over Boone's hand.
True. Yeah. I just would have, I guess, really, while I wanted Raylan and Boone to face off, I would have loved for her to get to kill Boone, really. Like, if Boone had been injured enough here that she had to finish him.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That would have been pretty satisfying. But yeah, they can't do everything. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I said, I'm obviously reading a lot into Loretta in this episode because she's barely there. Mm-hmm. But I do appreciate they give us no definitive answers about her. That her story is just starting, so why would you wrap her up?
Mm-hmm. True.
And Brenton's saying that he would have changed it around a little and had the Boone showdown with Raylan after the Boyd Raylan scene in the prison at the end. So it's just the two of them. They kill each other. He likes the idea of Raylan dying at the end.
So wait, years later?
Sounds like.
That's too long. I wouldn't have bought that. Boone would have tracked his ass down long before that. Boone is too obsessive. Yeah. Raylan's like Boone's goal. It feels like Boone wants to die a little bit. Not really, but like, if he's gonna die, he sure fucking wants somebody like Raylan to be the one that kills him because it's just an insult otherwise,
Right. I don't know. I guess I could see it. I've realized I like happy endings. So I used to totally not.
That's not a problem.
I used to not, but I appreciate when a show can give me a happy ending. And so I like that we got one here. So I could see it, and I could see, I guess, Throne of the Poetry in it, and that kind of, this was inevitable kind of thing. Like I was, kind of like I was just saying, even if it didn't necessarily have to be Boone. But I could see them doing what Brenton says. I don't know that I'm with him there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Ben Hamill says Elmore Leonard characters don't change, and if they do, they change very little. And I don't think that's just his character. Like, I think that's human nature. Most people don't really change very much, and if they do, it's tiny incremental scraps of wisdom that we manage to piece together into this ridiculous quilt of nonsense and hope that it fucking keeps us warm because God knows winter's coming. And I come up with analogies sometimes that I hear myself halfway through it and I'm like, what? Where'd that come from? But
I just imagine the little you inside your head going, oh God, how do I finish this sentence?
I'm just winter's coming. Yeah.
Knitting, quilt, warmth, Game of Thrones. Got it. Okay.
I didn't even think of the Game of Thrones thing until the words were out of my mouth. And then I was like, oh. But yeah, I think that Raylan dying, it's not necessarily a like, I understand what you mean about it being a happy ending. For me, Raylan dying would not have not been a happy ending. Okay. And I'm not sure that I'm supposed to feel that way about him, but the show surprised me in that they showed him being able to live a more balanced life than I ever expected of him, because he kind of seems like the type of person that is destined to burn out in this job doing this. That just feel, and it doesn't, his behavior for the last 5 or 6 episodes of this show has not led me to believe that he'd be able to just let go of this, despite having caught Boyd. It felt abrupt to me that then he's able to just move away, let Ava do her thing, and he's not. That was the only thing that felt a little hard to me, was I was just like, he's able to strike that balance and be not married to the job a lot more easily than I would have expected after how much he was immersed in this and ready to give up everything. He was about to get arrested, like.
I don't know though, because I feel like he was, you're right, in this instance he was, because Boyd did definitely become his obsession and everything else. He started as his obsession and it only got worse.
Right.
But Raylan had a lot of shit to work out about where he came from, about his father, about
Mhm.
his past and his future, and all of those things. And I think that's over the last 6 seasons is him coming to terms with he had to sit here and stew and bring himself to the boiling point several times so he can work it all out and to get it out of his system and figure his shit out. And I feel like in this last season, as much as he's been obsessing on Boyd specifically, he's been able to put a lot of other things to bed. So he is able to be a little happier and a little more easygoing, and
Even
leave
if
Harlan
that's true,
behind.
though, how is he able to walk away from all of what happened? Because the circumstantial evidence looks really bad for him. And in the end, Ava drives away. And there is no reason to me that they wouldn't, like, if they had suspected him of colluding with her the entire time, that they would allow him to be the one driving to bring her in and not indict him for her escape. And that's apparently right. Doesn't really like happen, or everybody seems to drop it like as a suspicion,
Well, and I think that's why we skip ahead 4 years, because is that really the most interesting thing for them to spend the last episode talking about?
But I
don't know that it is.
Like, we skip ahead 4 years and see him in Florida, but we don't skip ahead. Like, he still clinks glasses with Art in the office with a fucking Band-Aid on his head remaining from when he fought Boone. So it's recent enough that he still has an injury, and yet apparently all of that's taken care of. And it's not, I agree with you that it's not the most interesting thing, but to just totally sweep that away, like it's not even a factor at all. I'd like to know at least how the hell he managed to explain that to people, or how Vasquez suddenly got put off because he was gunning for him,
It could be Boyd corroborated everything he said about at least the night where Ava,
maybe
got away. It could be any number of things. I feel there's any number of ways they could have wrapped that up. I'm just glad they didn't spend screen time doing it. And
sorry, go ahead.
All right. Well, I like to believe that people can change and they can put things behind them and they can move on. And I'm not saying Raylan becomes a perfect person. I'm sure that isn't the case, especially because we see soon enough that he and Winona aren't together anymore. I like that they don't get to be a happy family, because that doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. I like to believe, and I choose to believe that people can change, not all at once, and not not in the way that it's often portrayed or has been often portrayed in, Hollywood, but I like to believe that. And so I'm with the show on this.
Well, I'm not criticizing what the show winds up having him do. I just feel like they could have led us there a little bit less abruptly. And they don't need to spend a ton of time on it. If they had just had Vasquez sitting in on them questioning Boyd for a split second and been like, so you're telling me she shot you? And Boyd's like, yeah. And clearly pissed off about it and clearly not lying. And then eye contact between Vasquez and Raylan, who's standing there like, yeah, motherfucker, I told you I didn't do that shit. That would be enough for me. And that would take all of 5 seconds,
Okay.
Just
That's
enough
fair.
to give me an indicator that he was, what's the word I'm looking for? The opposite of vilified.
Exonerated.
There you go.
So, all right. I mean, that's fair. And that's fair. They could have found some way to weave that in that wasn't, that didn't take up screen time.
When we start off this episode talking about how Raylan kind of is the guy who gets to walk away from everything, the season very much ends that way in a lot of ways, which is, one could argue they're keeping in theme.
Yeah.
And it's not like he hasn't learned anything, because he's clearly grown as a person, and that's definitely part of it. But there were some moments where I was just like, I guess that's just taken care of for him.
Yeah, and Ben Hamill said in the comments earlier that this episode does take a few creative liberties with both Boyd and Raylan. And you're right, that is one of them. But again, for me, I would rather them skate through it than get bogged down in it, because this series spends enough time bogged down in plots that ultimately don't matter.
But that's his whole, does that not matter? That's his whole deal, is that he doesn't face consequences for stuff. You know?
All right. That's
we just agree to disagree, but like you're saying that doesn't matter, and to me, like that's one of the biggest character, like one of the bigger plot points I feel like for Raylan is that he gets away with shit nobody else could. And I guess, like I said, they're just keeping in theme, and they're like, oh yeah, that just is how he lives. I'm like, well, okay, sure.
All right, yeah. Again, like I said, I guess agree to disagree because you're not wrong. I guess I'm not putting as much importance on it as you are. So, so back to our gunfight though. Raylan is alive, but with a bleeding head wound, and his hat has been shot to hell. Yeah, it's very sad.
I really want him to keep wearing it, but with just like a big old patch over it.
That's kind of what I was waiting for, but we don't dwell on that because all of a sudden his car screeches into reverse and takes off. He barely has less than a second to reflect on it before Ava has taken off, and he goes, "Oh God damn it!" And then we cut to commercial, and that's the last we see of Ava for a little while.
That was so funny though, because if I'm Ava, you bet your fucking ass I'm taking that car. Jesus, bye.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Did. She is still in survival mode, even if the danger has passed.
And one could argue she thinks in that moment Raylan's dead because he's down for a minute.
Yeah.
So
yes, he is. Yeah.
You know, I mean, as far as I don't think she is aware at this point, or maybe she is, that Avery's dead. I don't know what she knows.
No. Yeah, because she was right there. She saw Avery get shot in the face.
I thought she was outside, but okay.
No, because she was right there for Raylan and Boyd.
Right, because she's on the ground right there. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So this is just her. This is her in survival mode, and this is her taking her opportunity. You know, that's something she's always been good at. Is
right.
Realizing when it's her moment.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just watching that moment right here when he he goes to grab his hat and then the car starts to move and he rolls over. Just, God, come on. Just never ends. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. And then we have something that's almost kind of similar. As we go to commercial, we come back to Marshall's headquarters, and this is, the aftermath. And it starts our goodbyes. But Art and Raylan have a moment in Art's office where Raylan talks about how he's thinking about staying to catch Ava. And Art stops him right there and says, I brought you down here to catch Boyd Crowder. And you did it. And you did it right. So.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. And they shake hands, and Art stops him like we were talking about, pours him the drink. And they almost have a moment before Nelson walks in and goes, hey, real life. And they go, oh.
Right, yeah.
And they don't get their moment. So right when they're about to be reflective on stuff, nope, work to do.
That's life, baby.
Yeah. So instead, they just get a second to consider each other.
Shake hands.
And they slam their drink.
Yeah.
Shake hands. And Raylan walks out.
I don't know what she sees in you. It would be weird if you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And Raylan walks back to his desk, and we get his goodbye with Tim. And he pulls out a book, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, which I saw this. I looked this up. Elmore Leonard called this the best crime novel ever read.
Oh, interesting.
And so I assume in honor of Elmore Leonard, Raylan breaks it out. He says he's read it. If he's read it 10 times, then that's
low.
And that's low. And he tosses it to Tim. And then as he starts to walk away, you can hear Tim and Nelson just immediately bickering over the book, and I'll hit you with a stapler, and just back to business as usual.
Bless him.
Yeah. And then as he's leaving, Rachel is walking in, and she compliments his new hat, which we have not seen.
Yes.
And he tells her that I tried it on and it fit, which is what he said about his hat when they had their first conversation about it. And it turns out it is Boone's hat.
Yeah, that's pretty fun.
Yeah, and
it's like he took the antlers from a friggin' stag he killed.
Yeah, right? But that hat is also That's the hat that Raylan Givens wears in the books. It's
the type of hat?
that he wears.
Oh, okay.
And that's the one thing Elmore Leonard said about the character was he thought Timothy Olyphant was pitch perfect in the way the show did it. The show did the character. They did him justice all the time, except for that hat. They got the hat wrong. And so for the last episode, they give him the right hat.
All right. That's kind of fun.
I thought that was cool.
I like the hat that they have him on wearing in the show, though, because like that looked a little silly to me once he puts it on. I was like,
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I totally agree. That's they picked the right hat for him, but I like that they tipped their cap to it here. And then Raylan gets in the elevator, and we go to 4 years later in Florida, and we get to see Raylan and Willa eating ice cream in the park.
Raylan looking fine as hell in that t-shirt. Good God.
Yeah, you said you liked men being caring with their children and whatnot.
Him in this shirt with the silver temples, being all casual. Listen.
Yeah.
I know that he does it for a lot of women, and he's not always doing it for me, but when he does, it's a little bit too much. Like, it's distracting. I had a hard time watching this scene.
I get it.
Good God.
And I told you a few weeks ago that I listened to an interview with Timothy Olyphant on Nerdist from a couple of years back. Mm-hmm. And they were talking, one of the things they were talking about was apparently he had a brief career as a stand-up comic. And they had a whole, right? Yeah, okay. For like 6 or 8 months, he was a stand-up comic in New York City. And one of the things they talked about was he is way too pretty for stand-up comedy.
Man, that's such a strange, I can't imagine. Have you seen the Santa Clarita Diet?
No, but it actually, because of Timothy Olyphant, I like Drew Barrymore too. It's on my list, but I have not watched it yet.
Because it's supposed to be like a dark comedy, and I've heard a lot of people say, I had no idea Timothy Olyphant could be funny. He's hilarious in this, and in a very understated way. And now that makes some sense. Man, though, I can't... He does have pretty good timing on this show a lot. Some of the ways that I guess, but just, okay. I'm wrapping my head around that.
I know, right? But it was kind of like when I was really Chris Hemsworth is really funny. He's just a really funny guy. And how is that fair?
Some people just don't it's not fair. How do you get to be wildly attractive? Not just attractive, but the kind of good looking where I could look at you for a minute trying to find a flaw and have trouble with it. And be super talented at 4 other things. You should get one thing. You should be attractive. The end. That's what you get. That's your life. Congratulations.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I got, and that's just, that's the way it should be for everyone.
That's not watching Thor. I mean, his hair is his thing, and then they cut it all off, and I'm still like, how? That's not fair. Anyway, sorry.
And they had that one scene in the middle of the movie where he just walks around with no shirt on for a good 30 seconds of just the camera staring at him.
I was just you know what? Thanks, camera. Appreciate you.
But yeah, so Timothy Olyphant, he's growing into his dadhood.
He's wearing one of those t-shirts that looks soft. I want to touch it. Just be oh, soft. But with hard muscles underneath. What's up?
Naturally,
anyway, sorry, I'm distracted again. Nope. Also licking an ice cream cone. Whatever, it's no big deal.
Yep.
We're in another drink here.
So him and his daughter, she's adorable. And
she is.
They have a conversation about gross ice cream. And Winona walks up and and they have a pretty good relationship. And then you slowly realize that they aren't together. Which, like I said earlier, I really like.
Yeah, I like that they're not together. I kind of felt like they weren't the instant she showed up. Okay. I appreciate these two actors for the body language and everything. Just, it's so apparent right away. Oh, they're not a couple. There's a weird distance and caution there now. And they shouldn't be together. Like I liked that she wanted him back. I liked that she wanted a family that felt like a natural instinct, and I liked that, but I didn't think they should be together. So I was really struggling with that. So this feels very appropriate to me, but he's still part of his daughter's life, and he seems to be handling it mostly like a grown-up.
Yeah. I mean, again, we see him just this small snapshot really of this in the next scene, but he seems so much better adjusted than we've seen him in 6 seasons of television, which is nice.
Meanwhile, Winona's new husband comes up, and I'm just like, him standing next to Timothy Oliphant, that's just not a good place to be for anybody.
Yeah.
But it's really not nice to do to this poor actor.
He's got to have a whole Gary complex going on.
Right. And it's not like he's a terrible looking guy, but like he's real shaggy and he's got this mustache. What is this, 1986? Like, get rid of that thing.
Total Miami Vice thing going on, yeah.
Winona keeps Marion down. She needs to fucking get her act together.
But yeah, and Raylan, I also like that he gives her a little bit of shit over her husband calling their daughter punk.
Yeah.
But it's also, again, it's good-natured, which
I like
is
it.
also nice. Me too. Me too. So we then go to the office where we see Raylan still in Boone's hat.
Mm-hmm.
And he is at work in Miami working for David Koechner.
Really quick, I just want to mention the moment when Winona walks away after inviting him to dinner, and he looks at her and you could see the regret like all over his face. Whatever happened with the two of them, he's maybe grown as a person, but he hasn't grown enough to make this work. And he feels bad about it. And I really liked the expression on his face where he's looking at her going, oh, I came so close. Almost made it happen. Like, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I also like that scene. What Ben said before was the idea that Elmore Leonard heroes change a little, but not that much. And I like that the scene still, although Raylan is now better adjusted, the anger is gone, all of that stuff, he's still Raylan, and it really won't work. He hasn't changed that much.
Brenton Harsh must listen to the Leftovers show because he says, what if her new husband was Justin Theroux? Then there's some competition, which if y'all watch the Leftovers, there goes a man that always does it for me. Justin Theroux, it's not fair. But he's also plays a cop in that show. So him versus Raylan, that'd be pretty fair. I don't think I can handle that. The two of them on screen together. Don't do that to me. Lord.
I will trust you on that. I do not know Justin Theroux.
Oh, you should watch The Leftovers. Actually, you'd probably hate it. Never mind. Cancel that. But
really, you think so? I've wanted to watch it for like 4 years now. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Frustrated with it.
Okay.
I almost got frustrated with it. And I think you have to be much more of a nihilist to really love that show. So like, I appreciate it. I won't say that I love it, but I appreciate it. But people who really love it are people who tend to really struggle with depression, especially because it delves into those themes a lot. So if you're somebody who likes happy endings and are generally someone seeking positivity, that's not the show for you.
Okay.
But it's pretty beautifully done. It's impeccably acted too.
I've heard it's great television, so I feel like I'd at least be able to appreciate it.
Yeah.
But again, one of those things on my list. I'll get there, and I will keep an eye open for Justin Theroux.
Oh Lord. Speaking of dudes that it's a shame that you have to stand next to Timothy Oliphant, David Koechner. Yeah. Is in the next scene, which I was just like, what are you doing here for 30 seconds? What a weird thing.
I know. But I
kind of want to is there a backstory there that he just loved Justified and was like, will you let me on your show though real quick?
Well, he was in season 5. That first episode where Raylan came down to Miami and we introduced to the other Crow people.
How did I not remember that?
Yeah.
Oh man, I totally forgot about that. That's so funny.
Yep. So they brought him back for a quick little cameo.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, but Raylan shows up at work and talks to David Koechner, and he gets an envelope from Rachel Brooks. And there
Still
is
keeping an eye out. She's a dedicated woman. God.
Right? And it is a newspaper clipping of a pumpkin patch and a lady who looks an awful lot like Ava.
Mm-hmm.
And that is in Lebec, California, which is where we now go to.
Yeah, this is some Sister Act shit. Remember how she gets caught from being on the TV for some charity? They
right.
spot her.
Yeah, and long arm of the law has gone all the way to Lebec, California.
Yeah.
And this is where we see what happens to Ava. So what did you think about this?
I really liked this.
This is what you asked for. Almost since episode 1 of season 6. You said you wanted her to get out.
I just wanted her to get out, man. I didn't think she could do it either. And later on when he's talking to Boyd and Boyd's like, maybe it's for the best that she just died. I'm like, I could see why you would say that. You know, like.
Yeah, and I just totally cut you off. I'm sorry about that. I asked you what you thought and immediately cut you off.
I didn't even notice though, to be honest. So that's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, so she's living in California and she's keeping her nose clean and her head down.
And she's got a beautiful, like she's in a gorgeous spot. She's got this home that's just like stunning. And she's just doing better than most of us who don't have a wild criminal history that we're hiding from. So in some ways, I'm kind of like, what the fuck, lady? Give me some of your luck.
But she's also got a rifle right by the door.
Yeah. She
at
ain't
all
done.
times, apparently.
It's been 3 years and she's still ready.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and I agree with Ben Hamill, who said he totally wants a spin-off or a miniseries with Raylan in Florida fighting crime with David Koechner. Oh and God. I agree. God, I would completely watch that. Yeah. But yeah, so in California, he meets Raylan, and he's not invited inside.
Yeah.
But they go for a walk outside, and we hear a little bit about how Ava got away. And they never quite figured it out because she had no money and no resources. So he has 3 guesses. The first is Ellen May, who came back, which was really nice. And
that was sweet. I didn't even she didn't enter my head, and the fact that they brought her up, I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting idea.
Like I said, I like that she gets a little curtain call there, but nope, she had an alibi. Her wet sec contract can tell about that.
Right.
And then he thought it was Limehouse, and we see the same scene again, except it's Limehouse. But no, he was out of town. And so he gets his little, bow. Mm-hmm. His money, though, has always been on Win Duffy and his big-ass dog grooming van with a secret compartment big enough for 2 or 3 duffel bags, who also had a map of Harlan County, courtesy of that lady on the park bench.
I told you he was a survivor. I fucking knew it.
I love it, and I love that.
Not out of there alive. He gets out of there with the fucking money and gets to retire in Fiji. Not
vanishes
fair.
From the face of the earth. Rumors of surfing in Fiji. He drives off into legend. I love that. Not only does he make it out alive, he drives off into legend. No one knows what happened, but we hear he's surfing in Fiji.
This makes me so happy.
Right? I told you. Favorite character.
I love Duffy so much.
Yeah. So after they move on, and Ava talks about all the good work she's doing and how she helps out at the church, and she does volunteers, and there's horses and special children involved, and Raylan is not at all impressed by her not being a criminal in California.
Yeah, he's just like, are you trying to keep me from taking you in, or are you just shooting straight for sainthood? He's like super irritated. Mm-hmm. Everybody expects me to be impressed that they're not doing the things nobody should be doing anyway. Which I'm like, that is fair.
Yep, amen. I said good for Ava, but absolutely, absolutely. And finally,
no, go ahead. Wrap it up.
Yeah, Ava gives him a reason not to bring her in. And it's because she has a 4-year-old boy or a 3-year-old boy named Zachariah who dresses an awful lot like Boyd Crowder.
Yeah, this was because I couldn't figure out why she wouldn't be letting him inside, and then once you find, he was in the backyard, but he would have, Boyd. Raylan would have been able to see Zachariah from inside the house, probably, because he was like in the yard. So for a second, I was just like,
he's hiding.
Yeah, definitely.
Because she says it's okay to come out. It's just an old friend.
Yeah, so I think she sent him in the yard so that if something were to happen to her, nobody knows this boy exists and he can run for it to someone to take care of him, you know? Which is just a kind of fucked up thing to have to do to like prep for your kid. Just like, hey, in the case of my sudden and violent death, like, Jesus.
I was thinking of that both times I watched this episode. I was just like, this poor kid is going to turn like 14 and realized what a weird fucking childhood he had.
Yeah, a little bit.
But, she has a little boy, and Boyd can never know. Not because she thinks that he would, like, come for him or whatever, but he would just really mess with his life.
Yeah, he doesn't have to hurt the kid. In fact, somebody like Boyd not trying to hurt him is what's going to fuck him up more than anything. Trying to improve his life in the brand of improvement that Boyd, like the way that he thinks, that's a disaster. Like, no. So,
seriously.
Yeah, I really like agreed with her 1,000% here. She's just like, just don't, please. I don't need that. I'm like,
Yeah. And so Raylan talks to her a little bit about it, like, you read to him and you play with him and I love his immediate level of investment. And when he tells her he's not taking her in, the relief, the way that things just drain out of her face is so good. She is so good in this moment where you can just see 4 years of tension exiting her body. Especially
because for a second she's like, well, let me at least get in touch with somebody. Like, she's like, if you're going to take me, give me a second to like get things in place for God's sake, you know? And just like how immediate her concern is, just if you're going to take me in, then so be it. But for God's sake, just let me do the things I need to do to get things okay for him. She is really awesome in this scene. I'm just so glad that she got out, man. Jesus.
Seriously. And Raylan also says, like, again, they never quite figured out how she got away and how she stayed away all these years. And he says, we were looking for a woman, not a pregnant woman.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also, again, just helps sweep over that a little bit more.
Yeah, because I have a little bit of a thing when shows decide to like suddenly make a character pregnant, where it can feel really like, they didn't know what to do with this female character. I guess get her pregnant, and that can get really old. But the fact that they didn't have her be pregnant when she was struggling with everything in the mountains, we didn't need that as viewers to be invested in what was happening. And then they just put that in later. Maybe she didn't even know that she was pregnant at the time. And so I'm totally fine with it. Because if they had suddenly had her, oh my God, I missed my pregnancy or I missed my period and I'm not sure. And now I have to decide what I'm going to do and shoot Boyd to get away because I can't go to prison because I'm pregnant. And I'm just like, it gets to a point where it's like, oh, so I can't not want Ava to not go to prison just because I give a shit about Ava. It has to be because of her unborn child, because that's what matters more than her. Fuck you. So thank you, show, for not doing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And so Ava gets, like you said, she gets away, and she gets a second chance. She has a different life here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. Good for her.
Amen.
And then,
speaking of not a different kind of life,
we go see what happened to Boyd Crowder, and he is back to doing what he does best, which is talking to a captive audience.
Did I say that he would totally just fall right back into this again?
Yes, you did.
I feel like I said that.
And he is in his prison orange at the preacher pulpit giving us one last Boyd speech about how he was driving through Mexico with a truck full of dead bodies and a car following behind full of heroin. And then he saw the light.
I love the way that they did this, because he's like, and I know what you're thinking, why do I have to hear this story again? So he's clearly telling them the same shit all the time. And it's not because he's like, he just wants to fucking brag. That's what this is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's so good. I love it.
And him climbing the ladder. Get behind me, devil. Get behind me. It's so good.
Anybody can walk toward temptation. I'm like, are you going to say, but it takes a real man to walk away from it? But it takes a real man to walk away from it. And I was like, for fuck's sake. He is saying the kind of shit that people post on Facebook thinking they're being really deep. Where if you like look at it for any amount of time, you're like, this actually really kind of doesn't mean anything. There are a few quotes. Like, I don't like to shit on inspirational quotes altogether because sometimes there are a few that I'm really like, oh, I like that. But a lot of the time, they're nonsense. And I get really irritated by them.
Did you see the church it was just in the news, the church I think it was down in Florida, had to change their sign because they wrote how it's
shared
like
that.
Maybe I saw it from you. Yeah, that it's kinder to swallow than to spit.
Forgiveness is swallowing when you would really rather spit.
That's
what they mean is that don't say the terrible thing you want to say when really you'd like to just go off on them.
Spit it out.
But holy shit, how innocent of the world do you have to be to put that on a fucking sign and not know how people are going to see that? I can't imagine that being that innocent.
Oh.
I just don't even understand what kind of person you are to not think of that. Like, oh my God.
I died. Oh, I died.
But when I always think of like for in the Harry Potter movies, because this drives me nuts, people quote this all the time and it's not even from the books, but the happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the light. And so many people love this quote, put it on the front of notebooks, get fucking tattoos of it. But when you break it down, what he's saying is, even when you're really sad, just remember to be happy.
Just find something to be happy about.
That's not how that works. That's not how any of this works. And I get so mad because people are just like, well, just look for the positive. No. That's not, no. I'm sorry. Like, it just, that drives me fucking crazy. And I'm really glad that it's not in the books, that it is specifically a movie quote so that J.K. Rowling does not get saddled with that nonsense, because the quotes that she has Albus saying are mostly great and really are kind of profound. But then the one that everybody fucking talks about all the time is that one, which is garbage. Sorry. Quotes, everyone. I get mad about them.
That's okay. The more people who recognize what a ridiculous bullshit quote that is,
I get so mad about it.
The better the world gets, just in increments, in very small amounts, one person at a time.
And I feel like I ranted about that on the Harry Potter cast, and I feel a little guilty because I know some of my listeners have that fucking tattoo. And I'm over here just being like, ha, you loser. But like, kind of, you loser. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, Boyd's back to preaching, and it's hysterical. And then he gets interrupted by the prison guard who's got a visitor. And it's not even visitor day.
Guess who's here?
Guess who's here? And they get our final scene, and it's Boyd and Raylan. And Raylan is, ostensibly Raylan is here to show Boyd Ava's death certificate.
Yeah.
And he's got a whole story about how they found her, and it happened 3 years ago, and all of this stuff. And it eventually, and it serves an important purpose to keep Ava safe and keep Boyd, cut all that stuff out. And then it turns into a little bit more, it turns into something more personal. They have a really nice conversation, almost as friends.
Yes, very, very nearly. I like this because I don't want to say they kind of trick you into thinking that Raylan's giving up Ava, because I never really thought that. But they definitely make you go, wait, what is he doing? And
well, I didn't see. I never thought that. I didn't think that for a second, that he was there to give up Ava.
do you see this?
You think
chat?
they were going for that? From Nightbot? Yes.
Oh, Jesus Christ, guys, I'm not reading that on the air, but it is hilarious.
And Nightbot, I'm keeping my dirty panties to myself, okay?
Good God, I am blocking the shit out of you, but that is really funny. I'm sorry, guys. Clearly Clearly Nightbot just like copy pastes that everywhere he can. I didn't think that he was giving her up, but did you assume that he was telling Boyd that she was dead? Is that what you went into it thinking he was doing?
I didn't know what he was doing there, but I did not think he was blowing up Ava's spot. I mean,
that's my point, is like, I didn't think he was giving her up, but I didn't know what he was actually doing.
Oh, okay.
So
yes,
I was kind of like, why is he bringing this up? Why did he just said that he hoped to never see Boyd again in his life?
Right.
And here he's crossed the country to talk to him in person, and he's bringing up Ava. What the fuck are you doing, dude? Like, I started to get a little agitated just thinking that he was, I don't know what, like, you know, and so when he finally is like, okay, here's your death certificate, I was like, oh, that's really nice of him. Oh, that's really sweet. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's like he finally treats her like a person. And I appreciated that he, although again, he doesn't seem to like care about her as a person until he realizes she's got a kid. And then he's suddenly like, oh, well, maybe I won't bring you in after all. And I'm like, yeah, that tracks. But one could also say that he really like understands that more now, having his own child that he's grown attached to. So, okay. But I am side-eyeing him a tiny bit for that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, the two of them, I'm glad that we have one more interaction between the two of them that was not at gunpoint.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. It's a really nice, again, they're talking about Ava, and they're talking about, it's almost this reminiscence, and it's this thing, again, it ends, well, blah, 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 blah. The way it ends, I know. But Boyd essentially asks him, why did you come all the way here to tell me this? And he says, well, it's news that should be delivered in person. He goes, really? That's the whole reason that you're here?
Yeah, he knows.
He says, well, I suppose if I allow myself to be sentimental, despite all that occurred, there's one thing I wander back to. We dug coal together. And essentially it's just they have a bond. There is something that they have shared that nobody else can get. Not Art, not Rachel, not Tim, not even those other people, because there is something there that they can't quite explain. And this gives them that opportunity to feel that again, just for a second.
Yeah, I really liked that, because the lengths to which the two of them like went to face off with each other cannot be merely explained by, I'm the lawman and you're the criminal. Right. It's not that's not enough. So to have them sort of feel like they're connected in another way is really important. And I'm glad that in the end, the show really wanted to remind us it's not just animosity. You know, that's not all it was that was driving the both of them. And how that can almost make it worse, that you feel like a positive connection to somebody that will exacerbate the negative and make it that much more pressing at times, you know? So yeah.
But yeah, and then it ends with, we dug coal together. And that is also the way that the Elmore Leonard short story Fire in the Hole ends with that same thing. And now in the novella, Boyd Crowder shot and killed at the end.
Right. I remember you saying that, and I was like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah. And Raylan's talking about, I forget exactly how the conversation goes. I wanted to look it up before we started to record, and I forgot. But it does end with him talking about, there's just something. We dug coal together. That means something. And
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. And it's been this phrase they've repeated a couple of times without ever really explaining what that means.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully by this point, you don't need it spelled out necessarily. It's just they've been through the shit. You know, they've experienced something together that not a lot of people can understand.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're on opposite sides of the glass, that, you know, that will always connect them. They don't have to like each other. They don't have to, you know, ever see each other again. But they had to do this. I love the looks on their faces. They look so happy to be talking to each other.
Right. Like, it's just such a surprising thing for them to be as, I don't know. And like, he like fucks with him a little bit and it's like, oh, I don't think that you'd like Florida though. A lot of Jews.
Yeah.
Boyd is like, Raylan, I think you're trying to provoke me. And Raylan like sort of giggles. Like there's something sweet there against my will, I feel like, you know?
And they actually, speaking of that, they do a callback to the first episode again in their conversation where he says, I hear you're preaching again, gather on a flock. And after a lot of Jews, Boyd says, Jesus Christ was a Jew, which is what Raylan told Boyd back in the first episode.
Yes.
To fuck with his whole white power thing.
And,
I'm
always here for fucking with the whole white power thing. I'm always down for that, so you know.
All right. Ben Hamill just got the quote out of the novella. Said, Art was frowning now. You're sorry you killed him? I thought I explained it to you, Raylan said in his quiet voice. Boyd and I dug coal together.
Yeah. It's Brenton says this has been, and I think he was going to say fun, but it keeps cutting out and I have to get going. Sorry, Brenton. He just says, this has been. I'm like, it sure has been. But yeah.
It sure has been a thing you spent on.
Just like, he can't just kill this guy and not feel anything about it. He can't just kill him and be like, well, I just did my job. This is just more, it's more than that. It just is, Yeah.
But yeah, I love that it ends with the two of them having a conversation. They're not at each other's throats, and there's a measure of peace between them, which, again, I just think it's a really nice note to end the show on.
Right. Agreed. Excuse me.
So yeah, and thus ends Justified. A thank you to the people of Harlan, Kentucky, and the men and women of the United States Marshal Service for their support and their stories.
This is I just really enjoyed this show, and there were a couple spots where it kind of dipped for me a bit, but overall, I thought it was really strong, and
I'm glad.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed it.
It's such a different show than I feel like you've covered on the network, and it was definitely not the show. I was excited when you said you wanted to cover it, and then I had to go and kind of rush my way through it. And like you, it had kind of highs and lows to it, but I was really glad I watched it by the end of it. And,
I feel like it's something that because it is, as you said, outside of what I often cover. Hello, Kat. She's left me alone this whole time, but now she has to show up. But I like the fact that it's outside of what I often cover because it gave me a break from the wild high fantasy of both Harry Potter and Dresden Files and something like fucking Twin Peaks, which just I need something to ground me here and there, Even The Leftovers has some supernatural elements that are out there. So it is nice to have a show that's sort of like The Wire in that it is more grounded in reality. It's not as real as The Wire.
No.
The Wire's a bit too real at times. God knows. But I did cover that, guys. So if you haven't listened to that, you should. But yeah, this was a nice departure, and it's something I feel like this kind of show is something that I might look at covering again. Maybe The Shield, but I'm afraid that I might. All right. Well, I feel like that's it, right?
Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I guess actually I do want to ask you. So, you said that you were shocked at how strong this season was. What do you think of it overall now, start to finish? Where do you rank it? Where do you rank the show's seasons, do you think? Because season two was season 2 is a big one for a lot of people, but you were less than enthusiastic, as enthusiastic as the hype, at least.
Yeah, no, a lot of people were just like, I can't wait for you to watch this. And I was like, once I got into it, just kind of like, I guess.
And then season 5, which a lot of people regard to be a shit show, you really, really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I liked the final season the most, to be honest. And I think a lot of that is because you just know the characters so well by this point, and they decide to laser focus back in on them. I think that was a really smart move, writing wise. Have us develop this thing that we really give a shit about, and then instead of what so many shows do, which is fan out too much at the end because you're trying to encompass everything. Cut all of the fat and bring it right back in. And that's something I would like to remember in my writing, is once I decide to circle back around, actually make sure that people really care about the things I'm circling back to. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel for me, especially now having gotten to watch it through at a much more deliberate pace. I think season 4 edges this season out just slightly for me. I think, again, these last couple of episodes are really, really, really strong this season, and I like the new characters they introduce. But I like the drive of season 4. I like the pressure it puts on everybody, and the mystery that they let stay a mystery for a really long time.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, did you end up with a favorite character?
You know who my favorite character is. It's Win Duffy.
Okay, just checking.
Win Duffy forever. Yeah, he always comes through with the smart, like he's just smart. And he knows when to cut his losses, which is what Boyd doesn't know how to do. Because Boyd is also smart, but he manages to pull back before Boyd does. Boyd gets fucking fixated, and it's almost a matter of pride for him to be able to, do something just because so many people have like given him shit about it that he's like, well, fuck you now. And Duffy, like, not that ego isn't a thing for him at all, but it's like he is really able to back burner that in favor of just staying out of jail and alive. And that guy is my fave forever. All right. If I were going to partner up with a criminal, that that would be him for sure.
So if you had to pick one character just one who should have gotten more screen time, who do you pick?
I think Boone.
Okay, out of the whole show?
I don't know. Like, I thought he was so good, but also maybe he kind of did as much as he could do. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I really would have liked to see more of Rachel. I feel like they really kind of tiptoed around her and kept her sort of flat. And I think she could have been really interesting. And instead they just did one weird episode with her brother. Yeah. And it was just like, it felt like they like kind of half-assed tried so that they could say, well, we gave it a shot, but nobody really liked it. So we just, and I'm like, yeah, did you try though? Like, come on.
That would be my pick also. I don't know if that was their, I don't know if that exactly would have been their explanation, but I feel like they got to at least make Tim the funny one. Mm-hmm. Rachel had to be the straight arrow, but they didn't give her enough time to be anything else, and I thought that was a shame.
Yeah, definitely.
Character we should have seen less of.
I'm trying to think. I can't, I'm sure there's somebody that I'm thinking of that probably like a villain. But I really can't think of anybody that I was just like, oh, well, and see, this is the thing, because there's people like Danny Crow who I fucking hated. But also, you can't kill him too quick. He needs to be around to cause havoc, or else what's the point, right? So, just a character that I hate isn't really going to cut it, because you need those people around. So, Devil? Johnny.
Ooh, good pick.
Johnny needs to go. He's around way too long. I forgot about him.
Good pick. Yeah, Johnny fucking sucked.
That fucking went on way too long.
Yeah, I forgot how long he lasted. Yeah. For me, it's probably Dickie Bennett. I liked so much of Dickie Bennett until he didn't go away. Mm-hmm. And I think he's a really interesting character, but he never changes. He never grows. He never learns. And they don't do that in an interesting way.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and like it felt like they had, like, when we see him later, he's playing him even more like out there. Like he's almost doing like a Captain Jack Sparrow, like off balance sort of thing. Where I love
that.
why are you doing this? So I think that was the main thing for me, was that he didn't go away and they leaned into the parts of him that I didn't think made a lot of sense. So yeah, I agree with you on that too.
Yeah.
At least he wasn't on, like, at least I felt like, though, he wasn't like the main event as much as Johnny was for as long as Johnny was. So
no, I just really think season 3 for me, you gave me a much better appreciation of season 3 as we went through it. But especially in that season, Dickie just got so...
Yeah, oh my God.
He just needed to leave.
Yeah.
He just needed to leave. And Ben Hamill is saying that... First, yes, they just let Jeremy Davies be Jeremy Davies, which is accurate. And he said he thinks Tim and Rachel would have gotten more screen time if the show had stayed more procedural like the first season was, which I also agree. I don't think it was a bad move for the show, but I also feel like there were some plots in there that didn't need to be there necessarily. There was the whole snake handler thing. Like they could have found a different way to do the Ellen May thing. I liked that. Again, that's season 4. I love season 4, and I liked that plot, but it didn't ultimately
lead to anything.
Yeah, they could have found a different way to do that. That gave them like an extra 15 minutes of screen time.
When I look back at that whole church thing, I remember all the the expectation I had about where that was going, and it never went absolutely anywhere except for Ellen May's character being developed by it. But it doesn't seem like you should have to introduce this whole other cast of characters to develop one person that we already know. I agree with you on that. Yeah.
And so I think there were definitely, if the show had been written a little tighter from season to season, they could have found time to develop them in other ways. Again, not that I minded things like the snake handler church. It's cool. It's a fun setting. I liked the characters and I liked the plot, except it, again, just kind of ended up being tangential to everything else.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with him, but I also think that could have been done just a little better. It's also, I've kind of come to appreciate that it isn't a perfect show. I think there are Breaking Bad, The Wire, they have this sort of like it's perfect television. It's the best television you'll ever watch. Justified isn't that show. It's got ups and downs. It's got peaks and valleys. But I also think that's some of its charm because it does let itself get lost in weird hillbilly folk life.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't things don't need to be perfect. It's, if anything, you learn more especially if you're somebody who's trying to do something of your own, like I'm trying to learn how to write better. Watching something where they've made a misstep and I can actually figure out what that misstep is, I learn a lot from that, realizing
sure.
They just should have kind of pulled back on that or rethought that whole thing. And yeah, I don't know. Things don't need to be perfect to still be great. And but it is really interesting how it's like mostly guys that are into this, for considering what Unspoiled is. Cause I think I have more female fans usually than men. And
yeah,
the women on this are like silent. It's all guys that chime in on this, which is kind of, I just wonder if there's something about the marketing of this show that really made women feel like it wasn't for them,
Well, I think so. I think that has something to do with it. I think that it's, and the tropes that it's playing with are all there. If you have to gender them, they're, it's guys television
masculine
tropes. Yeah. So I think that makes a lot of sense. In fact, the first time I heard about Justified was through my aunt and uncle, who are lovely people, but I'm sure they don't listen to this show. So I can say their taste in TV is not fantastic. And they wind up getting into this show because it is, a cop show that they get tricked into watching when there's a whole lot more there for them to, to absorb.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that it's, I wouldn't be at all shocked to find out that the viewership on this show and the listenership on our show is probably really heavily skewed towards guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've said, this show hasn't been great with its handling of female characters. So
yes,
I don't even want to say this cat. Do you see her now? She's clawing my shirt. Man. So I don't even want to say women like, we're so well represented in this, and you would totally like, it's a really good show. That in particular is not great. And so if you're a woman looking for that, this won't do it for you. But if you're willing to be like, unfortunately, as women have to be a lot of the time with most media, look past the fact that women get short shrift, then I think you'll still enjoy this. It's just something that, you know, as a woman, you often have to be like, yeah, all right, I'm going to compartmentalize. You know, I had to do that recently with Baby Driver, which is a great movie, but also there are two women in it and they're both flat as a board. And then there are these like really interesting guy characters all over the place, and we get nothing to do. And I have to put that aside and be like, okay, despite that, I enjoyed it, and I can acknowledge the problem and still enjoy it. But everybody draws a line in a different place, and some people aren't able to do that. So, you know. Sure.
Yeah, and Ben Hamill also just put up, there's an AV Club article, which I've read, which is, it is fantastic. It's a great little piece on the finale of Justified. And he quotes out of it that Justified honors Elmore Leonard by making great but not revolutionary TV. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's accurate. It is a really good article just about what a quirky little show it was. And yeah, definitely recommend it to you and to other people who.
Yeah, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
That's okay. No, that's all. I'm just saying, go read the article because it's good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like things don't need to be revolutionary to be good, and that's something that I have. I have a few friends who get real snarky about Stranger Things being derivative, and I'm like, fucking, so what? Who cares? It's still super fun. The acting's great. It's well written. Like, is it perfect? No, there are definitely moments where I'm like, oh, come on. But truly unusual work is so incredibly rare. And people go in expecting that nowadays, I feel like, and get disappointed when that's not what they get. And of course that's not what you're going to get 99.9% of the time. If you do, then be pleasantly surprised by it. But how are you going to walk in there expecting the most that mostly I just need writers to stay consistent with their characters. Number one priority for me. Just know who they are. And I feel like with Justified, they mostly really did that. The second season, Boyd is preaching, and then all of his dudes get killed, and he acts like he lost God. And I'm over here like, oh, but that's just who Boyd is. And if he goes back to prison, he's totally going to start preaching again. Boom. Final fucking episode. Look, because they know who he is. And that's the main thing, you know? And that's what I think is interesting, is watching people be people and not plot devices, because you can spot that shit from a mile away if you are at all discerning about what you're watching. So derivative doesn't bother me, you know? Like, there are times where things can be too tropey, but that's it has to be like hitting those buttons pretty hard for me to start to get annoyed by it. So
you just cut out there. I missed most of what you just said.
Oh, I was just saying you can hit tropes too hard, but you really have to do it way too hard for me to start getting irritated. Otherwise, I forgive a lot, as long as the acting's good and it feels like you're following character motivations rather than sticking plots in there and forcing your characters into pretzels to get to those plot points. So, yeah. Any other questions? I feel like.
No, I think that was kind of what I have. One thing I did forget to mention: this show doesn't end with the normal ending music for our episode.
That's true.
Yeah, I actually really like that. Again, it ends on such a mellow note, and we've got this really sort of like pastoral. It's not pastoral; it's a country song, but it's it's very chill, and I like that. I like that very much.
Yeah, it really sort of suits, because the heavy bass of the old song was like kind of emphasized how like it felt to me like Raylan gearing up to go out fight bad guys.
Right.
And so the change is sort of like, oh yeah, he's mellowed out and balancing his life a little bit better and doesn't try and act like a fucking action hero. So that's good.
And I think that's also a nice note to end your show on when your hero has chilled. But that's all I got. That's everything I have to say about Justified.
Whoop whoop. Awesome. Well, thank you to Ben and Brendan for coming to the live podcast. Thank you to Nightbot for being terrible. But I really appreciate you all coming and hanging out with us and talking to us and asking questions and suggesting things. Thank you to everybody who's left reviews on the show. And please, if you haven't yet and you've enjoyed it, go ahead and do that. And that's, even though we finished and wrapped up, it's still really important to Unspoiled to get reviews. So no matter when you're listening to this, do that. And it's still mightily appreciated. I still go check old shows periodically to see if I've gotten new reviews. So it will be noticed. And if you want to find us, you can go to facebook.com/unspoiledpod, Twitter at Unspoiled Show, Instagram at Unspoiled Podcast, and the website unspoiledpodcast.com. And you can also email me at unspoiledpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, coming up, I'm going to be doing Westworld in the new year with Rashawn, so that'll be fun. And Owen is going to be replaced with Maggie for my coverage on Orphan Black. So there's going to be some changes coming up with that. And I just started covering Stranger Things again with Maggie. So the first episode of that is going to be going up tomorrow, I believe, on iTunes. So if you liked the first season of Stranger Things, you should check that out. Because me and Maggie have a lot to say. Do you have anything to answer?
Nope. You guys can always find me on Twitter at Al Kingsley. I am not doing any shows coming up, but you can find me also on the Hannibal podcast and the True Detective podcast under Unspoiled. Mm-hmm. And you can always find me hanging around the clubhouse. I will still be there. And if you happen to be coming to Florida, you might catch me too, because I'll be around there at the same time.
Oh, yay. Yeah, guys, we're going to Florida to Universal Harry Potter World. And I'm super excited about it. And if you're interested in finding more about that, there is an event on the Facebook page for the show. So yeah, y'all should definitely come and meet us there if you live in the area and drink and check out all of the awesome Harry Potter rides and whatnot. I think that's everything. All right, cool. Dun, dun, dun. Woo. Well, thank you so much, Alan, for doing this with me. I really appreciate all the time and effort. Blood, sweat, and
Thank
tears.
you so much. Yeah, despite all the stops and starts, this was a lot of fun.
It was. So, yeah, you guys, this was great. Appreciate y'all. This is probably like the longest show I think that I've wrapped so far. 6 whole seasons.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think so.
Yeah, The Wire was 5. Breaking Bad was 5. Most of the other ones have been shorter that I can think of. So
yeah. Wow. Damn. All right.
Good times.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you. Love you. And we'll see you around the bend with a new show. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye everyone.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.